MGM spent millions creating The Wizard of Oz, but they also spent decades hiding the truth. The studio hired 11 writers, but only credited 3. They fired directors and destroyed footage to cover their mistakes. The Munchkin actors were paid less than the dog and faced terrible working conditions. One actor's voice remains in the movie, even though he was replaced and nearly died. But the most shocking secret? The studio covered it all up, and fans still don't know the full truth about what really happened. When L. Frank Baum published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900, he had no idea what he had started. The title itself came from a file cabinet in his office labeled A to G, H to N, and O to Z. The book sold out its first 10,000 copies in just 8 months. By 1956, over 3 million copies were sold. It didn't take long before it was called America's favorite homegrown fairy tale. And that was before the movies or musical. Just 2 years after the book came out, a Broadway version pulled in huge crowds. The magic of Dorothy and Toto had already taken hold. Everything changed again in 1937, when Disney's Snow White stunned the world. It wasn't just a hit. It made over $8 million in the US alone. MGM took notice. Arthur Freed believed The Wizard of Oz could become a musical that might even outdo Disney's success. He also needed something big for Judy Garland. MGM paid a record $75,000 for the rights in early 1938. 4 other studios were trying to get it too. Fantasy films were still risky, but MGM didn't want to be left behind. With Disney dominating animation, MGM wanted to rule live-action fantasy. But the first version of Oz MGM planned wasn't full of wonder. They told a young assistant named William H. Cannon to remove the magic. At the time, fantasy films rarely worked, so they tried to make Oz feel realistic. In his draft, the Tin Man was a criminal trapped forever in a metal suit. The Scarecrow was just a fool, stuck scaring birds because he couldn't do anything else. Dorothy wasn't even the main character. The Cowardly Lion was a cursed prince who fought dragons. Aunt Em was cruel. It was dark, sad, and far from the joyful world people loved in the book. Eventually, MGM changed course. They brought the magic back and started over. Getting a final script was just as messy. MGM secretly hired several writers to work on it at the same time. Each one had their own vision. Some wanted more music. Others wanted more realism or more fantasy. One version barely included Dorothy at all. At least 11 writers worked on it. William H. Cannon started it. Then came poet Ogden Nash. Screenwriters like Noel Langley, Florence Ryerson, and Herman Mankiewicz. Even Arthur Freed, the producer, wrote pages. They didn't always know what the others were doing. In the end, only Langley, Ryerson, and Edgar Allan Wolfe got credit. But it was lyricist Yip Harburg who pulled it all together just before filming. The final version was locked in on October 8, 1938. MGM put more money into The Wizard of Oz than any movie they had ever made. The final budget reached $2.7 million, which would be more than $60 million today. They used brand new special effects, famous directors, and original songs. It was a huge risk. The filming was long and full of problems. Staff were fired. Scenes were reshot. Scripts kept changing. MGM was scared the film would fail. They knew it had to be perfect. Casting Dorothy was another challenge. Shirley Temple was the first choice. She was America's sweetheart, but her singing wasn't strong enough. Deanna Durbin, a talented singer, was next, but her studio wouldn't let her go. Judy Garland, only 16, and already under MGM contract, got the part. But she didn't look like a child anymore. To fix that, they gave her a tight corset to flatten her chest. She also wore heavy makeup to look younger. Garland later said the corset made it hard to breathe. Even worse, early makeup tests tried to make her look like a doll, with blonde hair and strange colors. She called it her Frankenstein look. Thankfully, those ideas were dropped. Ray Bolger was first cast as the Tin Man, but he had always dreamed of playing the Scarecrow. His body moved like rubber from his vaudeville days. He begged the producers to switch. Buddy Ebsen, who had been cast as the Scarecrow, agreed. But when Ebsen started work as the Tin Man, disaster struck. The aluminum powder in his makeup poisoned him. His lungs collapsed, and he had to be hospitalized for weeks. Jack Haley was brought in to take his place. Bolger got his dream role, and Ebsen lost his chance because of the makeup. Even the Wicked Witch went through major changes. At first, MGM wanted her to be beautiful. Gail Sondergaard was cast, and costume tests show her in sleek dresses with a mysterious look. But test audiences thought a pretty witch wouldn't be scary. MGM changed course and made the witch ugly. Sondergaard quit. Margaret Hamilton, a former teacher with a sharp face and serious acting skills, took over. She agreed to wear green face paint and scary prosthetics. During one stunt, a fire effect went wrong, and she was badly burned. Still, she returned to finish her scenes. Her performance became unforgettable. The Munchkin scenes were some of the most complicated in the whole film. Over 120 little people were hired, most from circus or stage backgrounds. Some didn't speak English. They worked long days in hot costumes. Pay ranged from $50 to $100 a week, less than the dog, Toto, who made $125. Rumors of wild parties spread for years, but most of them were just tired and missing home. Some reported poor treatment and bad housing. Many weren't even credited in the film, but their musical numbers made history. In 2007, decades later, a group of surviving Munchkin actors were given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Before the world ever heard Judy Garland sing about a place over the rainbow, The Wizard of Oz quietly played in small towns far from the spotlight. On August 11, 1939, people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Dennis, Massachusetts watched the very first version of the film. A day later, it screened in a small theater in Oconomowoc with just a few hundred seats. These were test runs. MGM needed honest feedback from regular people before the final cut, and it worked. Viewers helped shape what would become a classic by showing what worked and what didn't. About 20 minutes of footage was cut after those previews. For the people in those towns, it became a lifelong memory. They got to say they saw Oz before anyone in Hollywood did. Then came the big premiere. On August 15, 1939, the film finally opened at Grauman's Chinese Theater. MGM made it an event. There were spotlights, red carpets, and bleachers packed with fans. 10 days later, it launched across the country. It was the most expensive movie MGM had ever made, costing about $2,177,000. But even with packed theaters, the movie barely made $3 million in its first run. When they factored in the money spent on promotion, it was clear the studio hadn't really made a profit. MGM called it a disappointment. It wasn't until the 1949 re-release that the movie truly made money. At the time, the public loved it, but financially, it almost didn't survive. One of the most famous songs in movie history almost never made it. Over the Rainbow was filmed on October 7, 1938. But when the first version of the movie ran too long, the studio boss wanted to cut it. He said it slowed the movie down. For a moment, Judy Garland's biggest moment was on the chopping block, but assistant producer Arthur Freed and composer Harold Arlen fought hard to keep it. They knew what it meant. The song stayed in, won the Oscar, and quickly became a hit all over the world. By March 1940, it was topping music charts and gave hope to American soldiers during the war. It didn't just stay in the film, it became part of history. Even with its music and color, critics weren't fully impressed. When it was first released in 1939, many reviews praised the visuals and songs but called the story weak. Some said it was only good for children, especially when compared to Disney's Snow White. But something happened on November 3, 1956. CBS aired the film on television for the first time. Over 45 million people watched that night. That one broadcast turned it into a tradition. Families began watching it every year. Over time, opinions changed. What critics once doubted became a symbol of American culture. It wasn't just a movie anymore. It was something that brought generations together. The Wizard of Oz earned 5 Oscar nominations in 1940, but it was up against a monster hit. Gone with the Wind won 8 awards that year, including Best Picture. Oz only won 2, Best Original Song and Best Original Score. Judy Garland wasn't even nominated for Best Actress. At the time, it seemed like Oz had lost, but over the decades, the roles reversed. Oz became the film people loved most. Its songs, its colors, and its heart outlasted the awards and claimed its place in history without needing a trophy to prove it. But the magic on screen came at a price. During the famous poppy field scene, white snow gently falls to wake up Dorothy and her friends. It looked beautiful. In reality, that snow was made of pure asbestos. Back then, asbestos was sold in stores as fake snow for decorations. No one knew it was dangerous. The cast stood in it, breathed it in, and let it cover their costumes and skin. Today, we know that even one exposure to airborne asbestos can cause deadly diseases. That moment of wonder was, unknowingly, one of the most dangerous scenes ever filmed. The man who was first cast as the Tin Man almost died. Buddy Ebsen was chosen for the part and had aluminum powder brushed on his skin daily to create the metallic look. After just over a week, he couldn't breathe. He was rushed to the hospital and placed in an oxygen tent. His lungs were failing. He never returned to set. MGM quietly replaced him with Jack Haley and switched to an aluminum paste. It still wasn't safe. Haley ended up with a serious eye infection. All this happened just to make one character look shiny. It was movie magic, but it came with real pain. The actress who played the Wicked Witch of the West suffered one of the worst injuries. Margaret Hamilton had to disappear in a cloud of red smoke and fire. But during the second take, something went wrong. The fire started too early, and her costume caught on fire. She had severe burns on her hands and face. It took 6 weeks for her to recover. Even worse, the green makeup she wore was made with copper and was toxic. She couldn't eat solid food while wearing it, and doctors warned her not to get it into her wounds. For months, her skin stayed tinted green. It wasn't just makeup, it was dangerous. Bert Lahr, who played the cowardly lion, suffered in silence. His costume was made of real lion skin and weighed around 60 pounds. Some say it was even heavier. Under the hot studio lights, he would sweat non-stop. The suit trapped heat and left him exhausted. He couldn't sit comfortably and had to drink meals through a straw. At the end of each day, the costume smelled so bad it had to be aired out, but he kept going, wearing it for months. The look worked on screen, but it was misery in real life. Ray Bolger became the Scarecrow, but his face paid the price. The makeup team glued a latex mask directly to his skin every single day. It looked like burlap with crosshatch stitching. After hours of filming, removing it was a slow and painful job. It left grooves in his face that didn't go away for over a year. Some say the marks never fully disappeared. Over 100 of those masks were used during filming. His cheerful dance down the yellow brick road came with hidden pain. The Wizard of Oz is remembered as a joyful classic, but behind its colorful scenes were stories that were anything but light. One of the most surprising losses was a dance number called The Jitterbug. It was filmed in 1938 and ran for about 6 minutes. In the scene, Dorothy and her friends were supposed to dance wildly in the haunted forest after being bitten by a magic insect. The number had complex choreography, bright costumes, and fast jazz music. But after all the work, it was cut from the final movie. Studio executives thought it would feel too modern and slow the story down. Almost all of it was destroyed. Only about 2 seconds survived in an old trailer. There are also a few blurry rehearsal clips and still photos. Most of the outtakes were lost forever in the 1965 MGM Vault fire, which wiped out much of the studio's archive. Today, the only clear reminder is a short line in the finished film, where the Wicked Witch says she sent a little insect ahead to take the fight out of them. There were also major changes to the script and songs that the public never knew about. While only 3 people are listed as writers, at least 11 others helped rewrite scenes, add jokes, or improve the songs without credit. Yip Harburg, who's officially known just as the lyricist, was the one who came up with the idea of Dorothy going home by repeating, "There's no place like home." He also wrote the scene where the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion receive their diploma, heart, and medal. That moment wasn't in the original plan. It was added quickly when casting decisions became uncertain. There were even other characters and full contests in the Land of Oz that were written, filmed, and then removed later. These changes were done so fast that little paperwork survived. Most of what we know now comes from leftover scripts and scraps from cut scenes. Buddy Ebsen, who later became famous as Jed Clampett, was the first actor to play the Tin Man. He recorded all of his songs and worked on the film for weeks, but the makeup nearly killed him. The aluminum dust caused a severe allergic reaction, and he had to be hospitalized. Jack Haley took over, but here's something strange. In the group's songs like "We're Off to See the Wizard," they didn't re-record Buddy's voice. That means every time the Tin Man sings in those group lines, it's actually Ebsen's voice. His face never appears, but his voice is still in every version of the movie. Some early DVD soundtracks even include his solo version of "If I Only Had a Heart." His footage is gone, but his singing remains, quietly hiding in plain sight. There was also a romance that never made it to the screen. In early drafts, Dorothy's love for the Scarecrow was supposed to be more than just friendship. When she returned to Kansas, she was meant to say goodbye to a farmhand named Hunk, who was the real-world version of the Scarecrow. He was headed off to agricultural college, and the scene would have hinted that Dorothy's feelings were deeper. That ending was removed before filming, but traces of it remain. When Dorothy says, "I think I'll miss you most of all," it feels more personal than the rest. Many fans and some historians believe that line was meant to reflect the lost romantic ending, even though it never happened. The connection between Dorothy and the Scarecrow still feels stronger than with the others. Judy Garland was just 16 when she played Dorothy. MGM wanted her to look perfect, which led to some very disturbing things. Her diet was extreme. She was told to live on black coffee, chicken broth, and sometimes just cigarettes. To keep her awake during long workdays, they gave her amphetamines. To make her sleep at night, they gave her barbiturates. This is how her addiction began. It wasn't a personal choice. It was something forced on her by the studio. Judy later said she felt like property, not a person. By the end of the shoot, she was hooked on both kinds of drugs. She kept struggling with addiction for the rest of her life and died at 47 from an accidental overdose. All of this started when she was still a teenager, simply trying to meet the demands of the people in charge. Another story that lasted for decades was about the Munchkin actors. There were 124 of them, and rumors claimed they partied every night, got drunk, and trashed their hotel. Judy Garland once joked that the police had to catch them with butterfly nets. There was some truth to the misbehavior. One actor was found drunk in a toilet, and others reportedly flirted with dancers. But most of the stories were blown out of proportion. Jerry Marin, who played the Lollipop Kid, said that they made only $50 a week, which was less than the dog who played Toto. He explained that most of the Munchkin actors worked hard and didn't have the money or time for wild parties. A few caused trouble, but the rest stayed professional. The legend stuck because the wildest moments got the most attention. One of the most famous myths about the film involves something much darker. Many people believed that a Munchkin actor died by suicide during filming, and that the body could be seen hanging in the background of a scene. The moment happens around the 48-minute mark, when Dorothy and her friends walk through the forest. But that shadowy figure was not a person at all. It was a bird. MGM had brought in large birds from the Los Angeles Zoo, like cranes and emus, to make the forest feel more real. In newer versions of the movie, you can clearly see the bird moving its wings. The rumor stuck around because of how grainy old VHS copies looked, but no actor went missing, and no one died on that set. It was all a misunderstanding, passed along for years until it became part of movie legend. What most people also don't realize is that the movie had 5 different directors. The first was Norman Taurog, who worked during planning. Then Richard Thorpe took over and shot 2 weeks of footage in October 1938. In his version, Dorothy wore a blonde wig and heavy makeup. She looked nothing like the sweet girl we remember. Thorpe was fired, and George Cukor stepped in briefly. He told Judy to take off the wig and helped create her natural look. Then Victor Fleming took over and directed most of the movie. But right before it was finished, he left to work on Gone with the Wind. King Vidor completed the last scenes, including everything in Kansas and the iconic Over the Rainbow. Despite all these changes, only Victor Fleming's name appears in the credits. The fact that the movie feels so unified today is almost a miracle, considering how many hands shaped it behind the scenes. Finally, there's the truth about what it meant to be a contract actor at MGM in the 1930s. People like Judy Garland had almost no freedom. The studio picked their roles, managed their weight, and controlled how they looked. Clark Gable once said, "I am paid not to think." The system was called star serfdom by journalist Alexander Walker. Even the biggest stars were treated like tools. They could be forced into films they hated, made to work through exhaustion, and punished if they refused. Diets were strict, schedules were brutal, and anyone who complained risked being blacklisted or publicly shamed. On the outside, it looked glamorous, but on the inside, it was a system built on control, fear, and silence. The wizard in The Wizard of Oz seemed powerful and mysterious, but he was just an ordinary man using lights, smoke, and sound behind a curtain. In 1939, this idea of someone pretending to be powerful while hiding the truth felt like a warning. Many viewers saw it as a message about politicians and elites. Later on, scholars said the wizard reminded them of real political leaders from the late 1800s, especially ones who used charm and big promises to cover up their lack of real answers. The wizard couldn't solve anyone's problems. He only gave fake solutions to keep control, much like leaders who rely on media tricks to gain power. In the original book, the word used to describe him was humbug, a word that meant fraud. The author, L. Frank Baum, had worked as a journalist and was active in politics, which made this idea even more personal and sharp. The yellow brick road was more than just a magical path. In the 1890s, America was debating how money should work. Some people wanted it backed by both gold and silver. In the original 1900 book, Dorothy's shoes were silver, and she walked on a gold road. That wasn't random. It was a symbol. By the time the movie came out in 1939, the country was was deep in the Great Depression. People were desperate for someone to lead them to safety, but sometimes they followed the wrong path. The Emerald City looked perfect from far away, but it was built on illusion. The citizens had to wear green glasses, which made everything look better than it was. It was a reminder that people often put too much trust in leaders or systems that might be fake or empty. The use of gold and silver wasn't just pretty, it reflected deep political and economic fears that were still fresh in people's minds. Color changed forever because of The Wizard of Oz. Before 1939, studios saw color as a fun extra, not something important. That year, only 15 movies used color, but this one did something new. It used color to tell the story, not just to look good. The switch from dull sepia in Kansas to the rich, bright colors of Oz shocked audiences. It cost 3 to 4 times more to use the Technicolor process, but the risk paid off. Suddenly, directors saw color as powerful as music or dialogue. The Yellow Brick Road, the Ruby Slippers, and the Emerald City became part of movie history. After Oz, studios rushed to use color. By 1965, 22 of the top 25 films were in color. Even today, filmmakers copied the sepia to color shift or use colors to show emotion. This all started with Oz. There's no place like home. These words, along with the image of Dorothy clicking her heels 3 times, have stayed with audiences for generations. Since 1939, the line has been used in speeches, books, and even sports. Politicians have used it to talk about community and values. Writers like Salman Rushdie used it to explore exile and identity. During the NCAA's March Madness, it's used to describe underdog teams returning to win. The phrase appears in pop music, TV shows, and stage plays. It reminds people of comfort, roots, and personal truth. That a young Judy Garland's line from a fantasy film could carry so much weight shows how deeply Oz became part of culture. The movie didn't just make an impact when it came out. It kept growing through television. On November 3, 1956, it aired on CBS. That first broadcast changed everything. Most movies faded away after theaters, but The Wizard of Oz found new life in living rooms. From 1959 to 1991, it aired once a year on network TV. Families would gather around to watch together. It didn't matter where you lived or how much money you had, it became a shared event. Some experts believe this made Oz the most watched movie in American television history. CBS kept it as a national broadcast, never giving local stations the rights. That made it feel special. Later, it moved to cable in 1999 and then to home video in 1980. But by then, it had already earned its place as part of American life. The film also inspired generations of artists. Its song, Over the Rainbow, became the top choice in the American Film Institute's list of greatest movie songs. Salman Rushdie called it his first influence and wrote about it as an adult. David Lynch said it's his favorite movie and used Oz themes in Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks. He even said he thinks about Oz every day. The 2022 documentary Lynch Oz explored this in depth. Fantasy films like Harry Potter and musicals like Wicked borrow ideas directly from Oz. Disney's Fantasia and Snow White also show its influence. Again and again, artists come back to the same ideas. The journey of self, the line between real and imagined, and the power of belief. The Wizard of Oz didn't just tell a story, it opened the door to thousands more.